June 2026, in Gdansk, Poland. The Ukraine Recovery Conference 2026 was underway. The world was talking about the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. Governments and international organizations, business leaders and investors had gathered to discuss Ukraine's future. But we had one question. Would the Ukraine we heard about in conference halls be the same Ukraine we would meet on the ground? We believed it would be different. So we decided to go and see for ourselves. We left Warsaw, Poland, crossed the border, and entered Ukraine. Our journey would take us through Lviv, Drohobych, Kyiv, Vinnytsia, Chernivtsi, and finally Uzhhorod, the capital of the Zakarpattia region. We traveled through cities and rural communities. We visited universities, local governments, businesses, and potential recovery project sites. A long journey into the heart of Ukraine had begun. After crossing the Ukrainian border, our first destination was Lviv, following a long border crossing, and more than 7 hours on the road. We finally arrived in Ukraine, a country at war. Naturally, we felt a sense of tension. But what we found in Lviv was somewhat different from what we had expected. The streets were alive, shops were open, children were playing in the squares, and people were going about their daily lives. The war was still continuing, but life was continuing too. We visited a local modular housing factory. We examined Ukrainian timber and local construction technologies, and we began to consider the possibilities for post-war housing reconstruction and the Smart Village Initiative. Rebuilding Ukraine is not simply about bringing Korean technology into the country. It is about connecting Ukraine's resources and talented people with Korea's experience and technology. We came to Ukraine to discover that potential on the ground. Our next destination was Drohobych, a city in the southern part of the Lviv region. Even though it was a public holiday, the mayor and local officials personally welcomed the Korean delegation. There was a welcome cake. There was genuine warmth and hospitality. But what impressed us most was their strong desire for cooperation. Biogas, agriculture, rehabilitation medicine, trauma care centers, entrepreneurship education, and opportunities for women entrepreneurs. The war has changed many things. Local communities need new jobs. They need medical systems to heal the physical and emotional wounds of war. And a new generation needs opportunities for education, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Once again, we were reminded of something important. Reconstruction is not only about rebuilding buildings. It is about rebuilding the environment in which people can live again. Then we arrived in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. The second night, the air raid sirens sounded, and before dawn, a large-scale drone and missile attack began. From inside our hotel, we could feel the tension of explosions in the distance. For a short time, we moved to a safer area of the building. At that moment, we truly understood. War was not an image on a television screen. It was not just another headline in the news. It was the reality of the very place where we were standing. But the next morning, the people of Kyiv returned to the streets. Cars were moving again. Shops opened their doors, and people returned to work. We visited Independence Square and St. Michael's Golden Domed Monastery. Throughout the city, we saw photographs of those who had lost their lives in the war. Flowers had been placed beside them. Candles were burning, and prayers continued. For a while, we simply stood there in silence. Why does Ukraine need to be rebuilt? The answer was right in front of us. In Kyiv and the surrounding regions, we visited potential sites for the Smart Village Initiative. We saw vast areas of land, rich agricultural resources, proactive local governments, and people who wanted change to happen quickly. The Smart Village we envision is not simply a smart farming community. It is a place with homes, a place with jobs, agriculture, energy, healthcare, and education. It is a place where people can return to their hometowns and begin their lives again. Biogas produced from agricultural byproducts and livestock waste. Decentralized energy produced locally and used locally. Smart farming and agriculture. New housing, rehabilitation, and trauma care. Connecting all of these elements within one community. This is the potential of the Smart Village that we are discovering in Ukraine. Leaving Kyiv, we traveled to Vinnytsia. Vinnytsia is a city with strong potential in agriculture, healthcare, and a growing startup ecosystem. We visited a medical university. We also visited an agricultural university and an entrepreneurship center. There, we discussed opportunities for cooperation in agricultural startups and biomedical healthcare. We also strengthened the foundation for cooperation between the Vinnytsia region and KUNBA. We had only one day in Vinnytsia. It was a very short visit, but it reminded us of an important truth. Business may begin with documents, but cooperation begins with trust between people. Our next destination was the Chernivtsi region, near the borders of Moldova and Romania. Here, we discovered another side of Ukraine: rich hydropower resources, vast fruit farms, regional industrial assets, universities and young people preparing for the future. We met with local government officials and discussed the possibilities of smart village projects and regional recovery initiatives. At universities, we discussed talent exchange, entrepreneurship education, and educational cooperation between Korea and Ukraine. The more places we visited, the more work we realized had to be done. But at the same time, the possibilities became even greater. Leaving Chernivtsi, we drove more than 400 kilometers. It was after 2 in the morning when we finally arrived. Our destination was Uzhhorod, the capital of the Zakarpattia region, a city at the western edge of Ukraine, close to Slovakia. The next morning, beneath the Carpathian Mountains, we looked across the peaceful city and reflected on our long journey. From Lviv to Drohobych, from Kyiv to Vinnytsia, from Chernivtsi to Uzhhorod, we did not see Ukraine from a map. We traveled its roads, we met its people, and we walked through its communities. We heard the air raid sirens, we saw the scars of war, but what we saw even more clearly was the determination of the Ukrainian people to stand again. Now, our next task is clear. We cannot stop at simply talking about good ideas. We must develop a concrete smart village proposal. We must conduct a thorough feasibility study. We must carefully examine the economic potential, the technical feasibility, and the impact on local communities. Then, we must begin with projects that can actually be implemented, small demonstration projects, pilot projects. One successful pilot project, one successful smart village, a small beginning, could become a new model for Ukraine's reconstruction. During this journey, we saw war, but we did not see only despair. We saw people, we saw possibilities, and we saw the future. The reconstruction of Ukraine cannot be achieved by one country alone. Korea and Ukraine, national and local governments, businesses and universities, and countless people. It will be a long journey that we must build together. EUREXS hopes to become a small bridge connecting that journey from words to action, from plans to the field, and from the field to a new future, beyond war, toward hope. Together, we are building the future of Ukraine, together for recovery, together for peace, together for the future.